You can call me Jack. That's not my real name, but it's the one I'm willing to put on this. I'm 58 years old now, but back when this happened, I was 25. I was doing a traveling job that kept me on the road 3 to 4 nights a week. Small towns, industrial parks, two-lane highways that you only use if you actually live out that way. You know the kind. It was the mid-90s. There were paper maps in my glove box, a beeper on my belt, and an AM radio when the FM went to static. I wasn't a hunter or a camper, and I definitely wasn't out looking for trouble. I fixed office equipment, copiers, postage machines, the boring stuff that keeps businesses moving. It kept food on my table, money in my pocket. I drive a company sedan from stop to stop, knock out a service call, grab a coffee, and point the nose toward home. That was my rhythm. It was my life. I knew the feel of an empty road at midnight, the way the air turns damp near creeks, the way deer's eyes flash like chips of glass, the way you count mailboxes just to stay awake. That was the choice that I made when I picked that job. Now this story I've only told to maybe 5 people in 30 plus years. I'm telling you now because I'm tired of carrying it alone. Not because it got any easier. It didn't. What I saw that night haunts me to this very day. I saw it when I was a young man, and now that I'm an old man, it's still the same type of fear. And I'm not getting any younger. It needs to be told to someone that I can trust. So I picked you. But I still won't give the exact road or the exact town. I still don't drive near that area after dark. And I definitely don't go down that road anymore. If you think that sounds dramatic, we'll just wait to hear what I have to say. When it happened, it was late, past 11, closer to midnight. I'd finished a call that ran long, the kind where a cheap part turns into 3 hours and a headache. I remember the sky was clear and the temperature had dropped. The kind of night where your breath fogs the windshield if you don't keep the defrost on low. The road was one of those narrow state highways with a ragged shoulder and a ditch that fills up with heavy rain. There were pine and scrub on both sides. No streetlights, no houses for a good stretch even. Just me, the hum of my car, and a dashboard clock that I kept checking like it would make the miles go faster. I wasn't tired, but I was ready for my own bed. I wasn't nodding off though. And I say that because people like to blame sleepiness when they have something like this happen to them. But I know what I saw. I was wide awake, especially when those things came after me. I had a lukewarm coffee riding shotgun, and a sack of stale peanut butter crackers I'd been gnawing to stay busy. Just a normal night, a normal road. Then I came around a soft bend and caught something in the beams. Something lying on the shoulder like it had just been dropped there. At first, I thought I'd come up on a deer, probably one that got clipped by a car. It happens all the time on those back highways. But as my light slid across it, the shape didn't look right. It was too long in the body, and too narrow at the hips. The head wasn't lolling like a deer's. It was angled and stretched forward in a way that made my stomach tighten. The closer I got, the less sense it made. A big dog, maybe? No dog that I'd seen was ever that big, and not stretched out like that. The way it was laying, it looked closer to a man, except the proportions were wrong. The legs looked too bent, and the arms were too long. My brain kept swapping labels. Dog, man, wolf, maybe even a bear, but none of them fit the bill. I rolled past slow, craning my neck to see out the passenger window. My headlights dragged over the body for just a moment, and that was enough to kill the injured dog theory. Whatever it was massive. Not roadkill, not some stray, not anything I could name. I pulled off about 20 feet ahead, my hazards clicking loud in the quiet. I sat gripping the wheel, debating. Every instinct in my brain told me to just keep driving, pretend that I'd seen nothing. But curiosity has a way of grabbing hold, I guess, and underneath the dread there was this strange pull, like I just had to know what it was. So I sat there with my engine idling, looking at the dark strip of road behind me, the faint lump just out of reach of my taillights. My mouth went dry, my hands were shaking even then. And finally, against every better judgment I had, I shifted into park, opened the door, and stepped out. And I remember everything about that night. I remember the night air was damp, it was cold, and it was dead silent. I remember hearing the gravel crunch under my boots as I walked back towards that body. I remember my body screaming at me, "Get back in the car." But there was something that just kept pushing me forward. And when I got closer, that's when I got my first real look at this thing. And my breath caught. The thing on the shoulder wasn't a deer, and it wasn't a dog, and it sure as hell wasn't a man. Like I said earlier, it was massive, but up close and personal, this thing was gigantic. Even curled and twisted the way it was laying, I could tell that if it stood up, it would tower over me. 7 feet, maybe more. The body stretched long across the gravel. It had wide shoulders, a thick chest. This was something built for power. But the head. God, the head. That's what froze me. It was unmistakably canine. More wolf than dog. The muzzle stretched out long and sharp. The mouth sagged open just enough that I could see teeth. They were this white-yellow color, and pointed. Too long to be anything that I knew. Even slack-jawed, they looked ready to tear. Its nose was black and wet-looking, like it had just been breathing. The fur was dark, almost black in the shadows, but it was patchy and uneven. Very wild. In some places, it was thick and matted with dirt. In others, it was thin enough to see gray skin underneath. It was unkempt, like it'd been rolling in the brush or fighting for its life. Or maybe that had happened when it got hit by whoever had hit it. But I kept inspecting this thing. I saw hands, not paws, not even close. These were long, bony hands, tipped with claws that caught the light when I shifted. I saw knuckles, fingers, 5 of them, but they were too long and too curved. I just couldn't stop staring at this creature in front of me. I stared at those curved claws for a long time, and they looked strong enough to wrap around my throat and crush it like a twig. The legs were next. They were bent and strange, not like a man's, or flat like a dog's even. The knees seemed to hinge backwards almost. Very animalistic, the way you'd expect a wolf's hindquarters to bend, but on a body that was far too big and far too human to be any kind of wolf. I found myself staring at its chest, and I swear on my life, I saw it rise. Just faintly, as though it took a shallow breath. Once, and then twice. But this movement was so light, I questioned myself. Maybe it was the wind stirring its fur. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But in that moment, I felt sure that it wasn't dead. And if it wasn't dead, it was just unconscious. And it could wake up at any moment. Every instinct continued to scream at me to turn around, to run, to get back in my car and drive until I couldn't see straight. But for some reason, I couldn't. It was like I was stuck there, staring, feeling my heart pound so loud that it filled my ears. It was like I was paralyzed or mesmerized, pulled in, like my body wasn't mine anymore. The fear was overwhelming, don't get me wrong. My hands were trembling and my legs felt like they were going to give out at any minute, but I just couldn't tear my eyes away from this thing. It was like I was looking at something that shouldn't exist. Because the only conclusion that I could draw to, looking at this creature in front of me, was werewolf. I was standing there on the side of the road, looking at a real-life werewolf. I don't know how many minutes passed. It could have been 3, it could have been 10. Time just kind of lost all meaning when I stood there, locked on that thing. I memorized it in a way I never wanted to. The muzzle, the claws, the way its arms lay twisted at its sides. So long and powerful looking. Part of me kept thinking, if it wakes up now, you'll never make it to the car. But still, I just stood there, locked in this silent kind of terror, studying the impossible thing laying in the ditch, because I knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. When would I ever see something like this again? And it felt like it was my duty at that point to take this thing into memory, even though now I still have no intentions of coming forward and sharing what it was that I saw. But then, as I stood there staring at this thing, everything just kind of shifted. At first, it was so subtle that I thought I imagined it, like the sound had been sucked out of the world. There was this steady background noise of crickets and this faint drop of water from a ditch. But it stopped. Even the distant sigh of the wind through the trees felt like everything had just vanished. It was like some kind of supernatural aspect of a scary movie. That kind of silence just doesn't feel natural, and it presses on you and makes your skin crawl. Makes your brain scream that something is about to happen. And then it started. From the tree line to my right came a sound so deep and guttural it rattled my chest. A growl, yes, but not like any animal that I'd ever heard. It was layered. It was thick. And even in the air, I could feel it vibrating. It was like it was coming from something with lungs the size of barrels. And then another followed, farther back into the trees. And this one rose into a howl that broke apart into this choppy rhythm. To me, it almost sounded like a language. Not words I could understand, obviously, but syllables or phrases like something was trying to speak through snarls and roars. I froze. My knees locked. My mind screamed at me to move, to run, but my body was rooted into the spot in terror. The hairs on my arms stood up straight. My whole body buzzed with adrenaline. The underbrush erupted with movement. It was so heavy that the ground seemed to tremble. Branches cracked like gunshots, and these leaves thrashed and got torn aside. Whatever was in there wasn't small, and it wasn't cautious, and it was definitely coming. And you know what? I feel like it wanted me to know that it was coming. I backed up a step, finally able to move. I know that my eyes were probably as wide as saucers, and my pulse was hammering. My gaze darted from the trees to the thing lying in the ditch, half expecting it to rise up and join its friends. My stomach knotted so tight it hurt, and I remember whispering, "Oh God," without even realizing that I was talking. I thought the one on the ground was the end of it, but the sounds coming from the woods told me different. There were definitely more, and they weren't unconscious. They weren't hurt. They were awake and moving, and they were coming straight for me. The first crack of the branches was bad enough, but then the shapes came out of the tree line, and my whole body just seized up. There were two of them. They stepped into the faint spill of my headlights, and for a second, I honestly thought my heart stopped. They were even more massive, easily bigger than the one lying on the shoulder. They were upright, towering over me, thick with muscle under that uneven fur. Even from the distance that I stood, they dwarfed me. The light caught their eyes, and that's when I knew these weren't shadows or tricks. Their eyes lit like coals. Amber, maybe red. It's hard to say with the way that they shimmered. Not just a reflection like a deer's. These were locked on me. They felt deliberate. Their breathing carried across the road. It was this deep, ragged bellow, like it was drawing air through something too large and too powerful to even exist. And then the growling started, low and steady. The vibrations seemed to shake my bones more than my ears. At first, their attention went to the one on the ground, and they let out these noises I can only describe as guttural chatter, like language but chewed up and snarled. The bigger of the two crouched down for a moment, sniffing the air, head tilted towards its fallen companion. And then in unison their heads snapped towards me. It was instant. They went from being focused on their own to focused on me like a switch was flipping. And their growling rose higher. It was so deep and angry that it felt like it was shaking my entire body. And their jaws were snapping with these wet clicks. The larger one's lips peeled back, and it showed me these teeth that were glistening even in the weak light. At that moment I felt absolutely hunted. I knew that I was prey, that I was cornered. I was caught where I stood. My body trembled so hard my knees were actually knocking together, and tears stung my eyes. Those tears blurred the edges of my vision. My chest tightened like my lungs didn't want to pull in any more air. These things, they weren't confused about what I was. They weren't curious either. They were angry. And in that awful moment, I felt like they thought I was responsible. That I was the one who had put their companion in the dirt. The way they squared themselves, I swear. The way their shoulders hunched forward. It wasn't just animalistic. It was like it was an accusation. And then these deep rolling sounds just started pouring out of their throats. I remember whispering, I didn't do it. Like the words would matter to these creatures. But the message in their eyes was clear. I had no business being there. And they weren't going to let me walk away from this. The second their focus locked on me, these instincts that I had finally went out. My body snapped free of whatever spell had pinned me there, and I finally got the nerve to bolt for my car. I don't even really remember making the decision. It was like one moment I was frozen, and the next I was sprinting, slipping on the gravel, heart jackhammering so hard I thought it would actually split my ribs open. I dropped the keys, of course, scrambled to pick them up, slammed into the driver's side door and yanked it open before diving inside. I shoved the key at the ignition, missing quite a few times before it finally caught. I was hysterical. I have no shame in admitting that I was crying at that moment. The engine roared, and the headlights swung wide across the road as I jerked the wheel. That's when I saw them full on. No more glimpses, no more shadows. And I was right. They were giants. Giant werewolves coming towards me, like some nightmare come to life. The headlights cut across their bodies, catching that thick fur and those broad shoulders. Both of them had claws like knives too. And they stood braced in the road, breathing heavily, mouths open in snarls. Then one moved. It charged in a blur, faster than anything that big had the right to move. I barely had time to register it before it slammed into the side of my car. The sound was like a tree trunk hitting metal. There was this loud crunch. The frame groaned. The whole vehicle actually lurched sideways on its shocks. My shoulder smacked the door. I screamed high and raw, nothing like the voice that I knew was mine. The air filled with noise. Ear-splitting snarls, guttural roars so loud that they drowned out the engine. But it wasn't just the sound, you see. It was the pressure. It vibrated through my chest and rattled my teeth. It was inhuman and terrifyingly powerful. The kind of sound that tells you exactly where you sit on the food chain. And let me tell you this. After seeing one of those things, we don't sit as high as we think we do. The other one dropped to all fours. The movement was so smooth and horrifying that I still see it in my nightmares. One moment it was upright. The next it was galloping like a beast, claws tearing at the gravel, closing the distance as I fumbled the shifter into drive. The tires squealed, I fishtailed, my headlights jerked across the trees. It was like a movie where you're trying to get away from something terrifying. I stomped the pedal, engine screaming, body pressed back into the seat, yelling at the top of my lungs for the car to gain momentum. It was like my vision tunneled with panic, and the tears were still blurring as the windshield started fogging up with my panicked breathing. I was choking on my tears. And behind me, the second creature pounded after the car. It was chasing me, chasing with intent, and closing on me with every stride because my car still wasn't picking up fast enough. I felt like I was on the verge of passing out. All I knew is if I slowed or lost control of the car, if I gave them any chance, my story would end right there on that strip of highway. The smell of burnt rubber filled the cabin as I tried to get out of there as desperately as possible. Behind me, I could hear it though. That pounding. Not footsteps like a man, but a 4-beat gallop. My mind couldn't comprehend how something that big could move so fast, but it was right there with me. I risked a glance in the mirror and nearly lost control. In the taillights, I saw it. Down on all fours, fur rippling, shoulders hunching with each part of its stride. Its mouth was open, baring its teeth wide, and I swear I could see saliva flinging from its jaws. Its eyes caught the red glow of my taillights and seemed to burn. It looked less like a beast chasing me and more like death itself. I was sobbing, half shouting at the wheel, "Please, please, please," like the car could hear me. I know that it sounds like this thing chased me forever, but it was just for a couple horrible seconds that it kept pace. It felt like no matter how fast I went, it stayed there, galloping with that unnatural human speed, like it was just playing with me, showing me it could end me whenever it wanted. The road curved, and I finally started to lose it. The car lurched forward, but held, and for a heartbeat, I thought I was gone. I thought it was going to lunge at me and tear me out of the glass because my stupid car was about to break down. But then, little by little, thank God, the sound behind me started to fade. The growling dropped back into the distance. I forced myself not to look again, not to risk another glance. I just stared dead ahead, white-knuckled. And then finally, it was gone, and I was at a safe distance. I didn't ease off the gas until my eyes blurred with tears, though. That was the moment that I finally realized that I was still alive. And that also was the moment I knew that I would never drive down that road again, or look at the world the way that I used to. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my whole body was shaking so bad I could barely shut off the ignition. My knuckles felt like they were locked white around the wheel. My shirt was damp with sweat. And I sat there for a long moment, just trying to convince myself that I hadn't lost my mind. When I finally stumbled inside, my brother was still up, watching TV. He looked at me, and his face drained. "Jack, what the hell happened to you?" I told him everything. Every word tumbled out of me like it was a flood. What I'd seen on the side of the road, the way it looked like some kind of werewolf or wolf man, half animal. The noises that I could hear from the woods. Then the two that came out after me. The one that hit my car. My voice cracked half a dozen times. I was still crying, still shaking, pointing toward the driveway, begging him to come see the dent in the car so I wouldn't feel crazy, so that he'd believe me. He didn't laugh. He didn't doubt me. He just sat there, wide-eyed, listening to me. And when I finally ran out of words, he said, "All right, we'll go back in the morning and look." That was the last thing I wanted to do. And I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't, not at all. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw those glowing eyes in my headlights, that huge shape galloping behind me. I sat on the couch with the lights on. My brother was half dozing in a chair, both of us just waiting for dawn. When the sun finally came up, I agreed to go back with him, because he told me that if I didn't, he would just go alone. I didn't want to go. I wanted nothing more than to pretend the road didn't exist at all. But I guess some part of me just still needed to know. I needed proof that I hadn't lost my mind. The stretch of road looked almost peaceful in the daylight. It was like an insult to the nightmare that I had survived the night before. The birds were even singing, and dew was glittering in the ditch. My brother parked a few yards past where I swore the body had been, and we walked back slowly. My heart was thumping so loud I could hear it in my ears, and I was scanning every shadow. But there was nothing there. No body, no fur, no blood, no drag marks in the gravel, or even footprints. Nothing at all. It was like the night had swallowed the whole thing back down and wiped it clean. I stood there staring at the bare patch of roadside, my stomach twisting. I pointed out the tread marks on the ground and told them this was exactly where it had happened. The only evidence I had were those tire marks and the dent caved into the side of my car. That dent was proof that something had hit me. Those tire marks were proof that I had gotten out of there as fast as I possibly could have. But the thing itself? Gone without a trace. No proof of its existence. "Maybe it got up and walked away," my brother said. Or maybe... But he didn't finish. I did. But only in my head. Or maybe the other two carried it off. That thought chilled me worse than the empty roadside, because if they had carried it off, it meant they were smart enough, careful enough, to erase the scene. And that meant they weren't just beasts. Standing there in the daylight, with no proof but a twisted car panel, I felt smaller than I'd ever had in my life. I realized that not only had I seen something impossible, but I'd survived it. There was no comfort in that, though. You see, it's been more than 30 years since that night, and I still carry it with me every single day. I still dream about it, often and always the same. Headlights cutting across a dark road, eyes glowing back at me from the trees. The sound of claws tearing at the ground as something too big and too fast chases me. I wake up with my chest heaving, my shirt and the sheets soaked with sweat, my heart thundering like it did that night. Sometimes I don't even make it to sleep. I'll be lying in bed, and the house will be quiet, and I'll hear phantom growls in my head so clear it takes me a few seconds to realize that it's just a memory. I've never driven down that road again. Not since the week it happened. I'll go an hour out of my way before I set tires on that damn road again. Just the thought of that stretch of asphalt makes my hands sweat on the wheel. And I don't give my real name when I share this story. You can call me Jack or whatever else makes you comfortable, but I won't put my real name on it. Not because I'm worried about ridicule, though Lord knows people love to laugh at the things they don't understand, but because I'm still scared. Still scared that if I make myself too easy to find, whatever was out there might decide to come looking for me. Even now, 3 decades later, I can't convince myself I was just tired of seeing things, because I wasn't. I saw them. I know what I saw. And it ruined my life. It ruined the way that I look at the woods. It ruined the way that I go to work. It ruined any trust that I have of this world. I never married because of it. Why would I put that burden on somebody else? Having children? Out of the question. So those things, they are out there. And they do destroy lives. People laugh about monsters. I don't. Not anymore. Because I saw them. And I'll carry that fear to my grave.